My knuckles went wide against the steering wheel. It wasn't even dinner time, and already the school parking lot was nearly empty. Sarah always prided herself on lesson prep, those extra hours ensuring her students got the best. But lately, those long afternoons seemed to bleed into late evenings more often than not. Faculty workshop, she'd said this morning, a touch too bright. My cop brain buzzed. The part of me I couldn't switch off even when relaxing with my wife. Was it naive to trust her? We'd been together since college, built a life of comfortable routines and shared dreams. But a routine can be faked. Dreams can change. Eyes scanning the emptying lot, I spotted her car. Relief should have hit, but instead, a sour unease rose in my throat. She was talking to someone, a man, tall, with a laugh that seemed too easy for a professional setting. I couldn't make out his face at this distance. Didn't need to. The way he leaned in, the touch on her arm as they laughed. Something in me instinctively recoiled. Think, man, think. Nothing concrete yet. I scolded myself. Yet, the way she smiled at him, unguarded, so unlike the half-smiles she aimed at me lately. A low hum of dread throbbed at the base of my skull. She turned, saw my car, and the smile faltered ever so slightly. Her colleague, if that's what he was, nodded a curt goodbye. Sarah hurried over, slipping into the passenger seat with a breathless, "Sorry," ran longer than I thought. I forced a casual tone. Meeting drag out? Just some curriculum debates. Tedious, she sighed, but her fingers fiddled with her phone. That damn phone, glued to her hand like an extra limb lately. You okay? I asked, studying her. Makeup a touch heavier than usual, a new floral scent I couldn't quite place. She seemed brighter, somehow, and nervous under it, maybe. Fine, just tired. Sarah pulled at her hair, avoiding my eyes. Can we grab takeout? I'm wiped. The drive home thrummed with unspoken tension. I wanted to blurt out questions. Who was that guy? Why the extra hours, the secret of phone calls, the shift in her whole demeanor? But if I was wrong, I couldn't bear the look I knew I'd see in her eyes. Disappointment that I didn't trust her. We ate in front of the TV, her tapping away at her phone even during commercials. Once, I would have teased her about it. Now, it was an icy knot in my gut. Early night. My attempt at normalcy sounded hollow. Headache, she mumbled, barely looking up. As Sarah disappeared into our bedroom, the little cop voice in my head screamed it was a lie. But the bigger part of me, the husband part, whispered a desperate prayer. Please let me be wrong. The clock glared back at me, 2:13 a.m. Outside our bedroom door, the faint rhythmic tapping of Sarah's laptop keyboard and a muffled murmur of her voice cut through the silence. Why the late-night work session? The school wouldn't be emailing curriculum changes at this hour. A knees crawled up my spine. I tried to let it go, to convince myself the scent of unfamiliar cologne on her jacket was some random student's, not another man's. But now, getting up, I padded to the study under the guise of grabbing a glass of water. As I passed her open laptop, the screen flashed, and not with spreadsheets or lesson plans. A private chat window flickered before being hastily minimized. My heart sank. I should have confronted her right then, demanded an explanation. That's the cop way, direct, unafraid of the truth. But the fear of what that truth might be clenched in my gut. Days blurred into a haze of hyper-awareness. I cataloged every lingering glance at her phone, every whispered call she took in the other room. And the guilt ate at me, hot and bitter. I'd never been the snooping type. We'd built our marriage on honesty, on the kind of trust I'd sworn I could spot in a suspect a mile away. Yet, here I was, sinking to those same shadowy tactics. Just a quick check. I lied to myself when the opportunity to glance at her laptop arose again. Cleared web history, nothing earth-shattering. My heart pounded both in relief and a fresh spike of dread. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Until the lunchtime surprise, I impulsively sprung on her. Sarah's car wasn't in the familiar spot at her school. Curriculum meeting ran long. She'd said that morning. So where was she? I enabled the Find My Phone feature on her phone, hand shaking. Risky, I knew. An invasion of privacy that could break what was left of our marriage if she ever found out. That afternoon, a notification pinged, a gym across town. Sarah, the woman who hated gym class in high school, working out in the middle of the day. Cold certainty settled over me. Sleep became my enemy. Each time I thought I was drifting off, her late-night typing would snap me awake. We moved through our days in a strange, brittle choreography, forced smiles and hollow small talk. I was both the investigator meticulously building his case, and the desperate fool hoping it would all somehow crumble apart, proving me laughably wrong. I rehearsed the words all afternoon. Not an interrogation, just a simple question. Sarah, are the long hours, the secrecy, is there something else going on? The goal was to keep my voice calm, a concerned husband asking, not a detective ready to pounce. Yet, the moment she stepped through the door that evening, the facade crumbled. There was a new energy in her, a vibrancy that had been missing for weeks. It should have brought relief, but instead, it sent a tremor of dread through me. That spark had never been for me lately. Over dinner, I tried. Those meetings going okay? You seem different, I ventured. The fork in her hand clattered. Different how? The wariness in her tone was sharper than I'd ever heard it. Just happier, more relaxed. I chose the words carefully, a minefield with each syllable. Sarah set her utensils down, the smile brittle. So now it's a problem that I'm not stressed out? Maybe that's what years of marriage does to a woman. She finally learns to let go a little. The accusation stung. Our marriage, was it always this fragile, just waiting for one harsh wind to crack it? I took a deep breath, pushing down anger mixed with shame. It wasn't the marriage at fault, not entirely. Honey, it's the other stuff too. The late nights, the phone hiding. I couldn't bring myself to say more. Her eyes hardened. Oh, so now I'm hiding things? You think I'm lying? I didn't say that, I backpedaled. I'm just asking. She slammed her napkin down. You're asking nothing. You've made up your mind. You're spying on me, judging me. God, I thought we were better than this. And there it was, the stone wall up. No amount of gentle prodding would break through that now. Days bled into a tense, silent battle of wills. I slept on the couch, feeling like an exile in my own home. Then came the girls' night out. Sarah announced it breezily, almost a taunt. Me and Lisa finally getting drinks, been forever. She deserved time with friends, I told myself. But after so many lies, large and small, the rational part of my brain wasn't in control. Desperation fueled a terrible decision. As they drove off, I tailed them. Not in a police car, thank God for small mercies, but in my aging Honda. And it was pathetically easy. They never turned to check if they were followed, as though the idea their little secret could be threatened never crossed their minds. The bar they mentioned turned out to be a lie. Instead, I saw Sarah's car pull into the parking lot of a fancy little restaurant, the kind of place we'd only gone for anniversaries. And then, my vision tunneled. Emerging from the car with a laugh, Sarah was linked arm in arm with a man. The same one I'd seen her with at the school. The world tilted sideways. I saw them through the restaurant window, bathed in warm light. They were close, heads lowered, smiles intimate. Every cop instinct screamed at me. That wasn't the body language of friends. Rage, red and blinding, warred with a crushing sense of defeat. The evidence against her was damning. The evidence against myself even more so. Who had I become? Sneaking around, doubting the person I'd sworn my life to. That night, I didn't go home. I drove until the tank was empty, the truth raw and festering inside me. The sunrise was a mockery, painting the room in cheerful pinks when my soul felt like a storm-ravaged wasteland. Sleep was a lost cause. Betrayal buzzed like a swarm of wasps in my head. The image of Sarah and him burned onto my retinas. Yet, underneath the white-hot rage churned an almost unbearable twist of love, the memory of better days refusing to be completely choked out. Then, a switch flipped. Amidst the chaos, a cold clarity descended. There was that cop part of me, the one trained to compartmentalize, to see a case without emotional baggage. It wasn't a healthy response, but a survival one. This wasn't just about a failing marriage. It was a crime. She'd lied, manipulated, broken the law. My routine turned chillingly methodical. Evidence was my salvation. I began with the small things. Photographing receipts showing fancy dinners, hotel charges dated to nights she was supposedly working late. Discreetly checking her phone at night, I found texts dirty but not truly gone, filled with endearments I'd never heard in years. The real breakthrough came, ironically, from an unexpected source. Lisa, Sarah's best friend, always kind to me, was a mess of guilt. A stray remark about a fancy new spa Sarah was raving about was all I needed to dig. That spa turned out to be a couple's only resort. More photos, more damning evidence. Who the hell was this guy? I used every resource I had, connections built over cautious years as a cop. Mark, the name finally surfaced. Local businessman, the kind who donated to charities and kissed babies for PR. Public records told me little, but it was a starting point. The lines blurred horribly. This wasn't detective work anymore, but a desperate man digging for anything to justify the cold fury within him. I unearthed Mark's business dealings, shady rumors that hadn't stuck yet. I clung to those slivers of darkness, desperate to prove to myself I wasn't just the jealous husband, that this affair had roots deeper than a midlife fling. At home, the game changed. I mirrored Sarah's growing distance, but with a chilling difference. Mine was a performance. Every polite smile, every detached, "How was your day?" was a mask. My purpose was singular. This wasn't ending with a tearful argument. This was a case being built, one piece of evidence at a time. My hand trembled as I packed Sarah's suitcase for the work conference. Each neatly folded blouse was a mockery. Her excited chatter about workshops and networking events made my stomach churn. This wasn't about career advancement. It was a romantic getaway masquerading as a professional obligation. "You sure you don't want to fly with me? It's a lovely resort," she'd said, and the forced innocence in her voice had nearly made me snap. Instead, I faked enthusiasm. "Nah, you deserve some me time. I'll catch up on some paperwork." A bitter laugh echoed in my head. How fitting that my lie was nearly the truth. I had paperwork to prepare, just a much more devastating kind. The drive to the airport was a blur. Not in the hot-headed, reckless way, but with the eerie calm of someone carrying out a plan meticulously laid out weeks ago. I watched her disappear into the terminal, the oblivious bounce in her step grating on my nerves. This time I'd anticipated the play. It was my turn to direct it. Tailing her was disgustingly simple. It turned out I wasn't the scorned husband playing detective. I was the detective playing the scorned husband. There was a grim comfort in that. The secluded hotel wasn't a place I'd recognize, the kind with private balconies and discreet room service. Seeing her emerge into the lobby, no luggage except a small overnight bag, was confirmation enough. Yet it was the sight of him, waiting with a smirk and a too-tight embrace, that made something raw and furious tear itself loose in me. I snapped photos from a distance. Their body language, the way she glowed in his presence, it was more sickeningly incriminating than any hotel registry. And just to be sure, I took a risk, slipping a tracker, no bigger than a coin, into her purse when the opportunity arose. Desperate times, desperate measures. My final gambit wasn't in my police playbook. It was a shot in the dark. Cornering Lisa was a low blow, but I was past caring. Leveraging that once warm friendship made me despise myself a little more. But the look in Lisa's eyes, the way she wilted under gentle pressure, it cracked the case wide open. Lisa broke down, tears and apologies spilling out. Guilt had been eating her alive. She told me everything: the fancy dinners I already knew about, the spa weekend I didn't, and worst of all, hints of Mark's true nature. Not some hapless guy seduced by Sarah, but a player, a user. That little detail ignited a new spark of protective fury. The next few days I moved like a machine, fueled by rage, by the need to finish this. Sarah returned from her conference, smug and relaxed. But even I, now so well attuned to her micro-expressions, could spot the undercurrent of nerves. The trap was set. All that was left was to wait for her to trip into it. Sarah's arrival home was a performance worthy of an audience we both knew didn't exist. She breezed in, a whirlwind of fake apologies for the crazy busy conference and forced cheeriness that set my teeth on edge. I played my own part flawlessly, the doting, slightly oblivious husband, relief masking the cold loathing beneath. My revenge was a marathon, not a sprint. While she prattled on about networking successes, I was already miles ahead. There was the ruthless divorce lawyer, a woman known as the Barracuda, whose eyes gleamed as she saw the potential ruin this case held. There were quiet phone calls to trusted financial advisors, shifting assets, ensuring that when the dust settled, I wouldn't be walking away with just a broken heart. The waiting was the hardest. I longed for the catharsis of a showdown, to shove the photos in Sarah's face, watch her facade crumble. But that was the impulsive husband in me, the one I fought to control. The strategist knew that true devastation was a slow burn. Lisa became my unlikely weapon. Her guilt transformed into a desperate need to help in some way, a twisted kind of penance. Through her, I monitored Sarah's every move, piecing together details no photo could capture. The nervous phone calls, the way her newfound energy vanished when she thought she was alone. And from Lisa came the revelation about Mark. His squeaky clean image was a facade. It turned out, a desperate side deal, a risky investment, perfect leverage. My old contacts, people who owed me favors, received carefully anonymous tips about it. Vultures circled, sensing opportunity. Mark would be too busy dodging his own disaster to play the carefree lover for long. News reports became my twisted entertainment. Headlines about shady dealings in businesses with ties to Mark. The net tightened around him, and by extension, around Sarah. Her manufactured sheer started to slip. The confident woman from her work trip was replaced by an anxious, haunted version. One evening, as Sarah frantically typed on her phone, the rage nearly overwhelmed me. The urge to snatch the device, demand the truth. It took every ounce of control not to explode. But in that restraint, there was a chilling satisfaction. She once accused me of turning cold. I'd become something far more dangerous, a man with ice in his veins and a meticulously planned path of destruction laid out at his feet. The knock on Mark's office door wasn't mine, but it might as well have been. News footage of the scene painted the picture vividly enough. Harried cops, stacks of paperwork carted off, the panic blur of his face being shoved into a police cruiser. It was the culmination of weeks of meticulous orchestration, and damn, did it feel good. Sarah, of course, was in full panic mode. She tried to hide it, but I'd memorized every tell in her by now. Questions laced with thinly veiled fear about Mark's troubles were dismissed with my feigned ignorance. Must be a ruthless competitor, I'd shrug, a touch too innocent. It was torture, playing dumb, but the payoff, that was coming. That morning, the final piece of my plan fell into place. Leaving for work, I, accidentally, left the TV on, the news blaring about the raid. Sarah's sharp intake of breath was music to my ears. Let her stew in that all day. Let doubt and terror consume her. The confrontation was inevitable. She cornered me that night the minute I stepped through the door. Tears, then accusations that grew in fury as her veneer of control finally cracked. My silence was a weapon now. Letting her hurl questions and plead for my belief in her innocence fueled the exquisite fire of my revenge. And then came the confession, not freely given, but dragged out through choked sobs. The affair, the lies. It was all there, tainted by the desperation of a woman whose world was crumbling. It should have felt triumphant. Instead, an odd hollowness crept in. This wasn't a victory for the old me, the man who'd valued honesty above all else. But I couldn't stop now. The photos, Sarah. My voice was cold. The hotel, the tracker on your car. Each piece of evidence I laid out was like a hammer blow. Lisa's betrayal, a detail I dropped as coldly as possible, was the crushing finale. The shift in the air was palpable. No more tears, no more fury, just a shattered Sarah staring at me with something akin to horror. The woman who'd kept secrets, manipulated my love, now saw the depths of my revenge. Here, in this broken marriage, the power balance had irrevocably flipped. How could you? She choked out, and it struck me as profoundly sad that it was the only question left for her to ask. How could I? Maybe because the good, trusting man I'd been was already dead, murdered by her lies and replaced by someone far more ruthless. Her betrayal had forged me into something just as monstrous as her. And that, perhaps, was the greatest tragedy of all. The divorce papers landed on the table between us with a soft thud, yet echoed deafeningly loud in the tense aftermath of her confession. Weeks of meticulous preparation by the Barracuda meant they weren't just a threat, they were a meticulously crafted death sentence to our marriage. Sign them, I told Sarah, my voice devoid of any inflection. Her eyes flicked over the terms. No alimony, a vicious split of assets heavily tilted in my favor, even a carefully worded clause hinting at the potential for further legal trouble if she contested. It was cruel, and a part of me, the part one didn't like to acknowledge, reveled in it. She, who sought to take both my love and my financial stability, would walk away with nothing but a shattered reputation and a mountain of regret. The full devastation of Mark's downfall became public knowledge. Illicit deals, financial ruin, the kind of scandal that made front-page news. Sarah, already reeling from my blow, now seemed to shrink further. Their affair, once fueled by stolen excitement, was exposed as seedy, built on lies and self-serving greed on both their parts. Then, the unexpected twist. An envelope, plain and unassuming, with Lisa's handwriting scrawled on it. Inside wasn't an excuse, but an apology. Messy, guilt-ridden, and surprisingly honest. She owned up to her cowardice, begged for a sliver of forgiveness she didn't deserve. It was a small, inadequate thing, given the pain she'd helped inflict, but a sliver nonetheless. _Spark. In our small town, the whispers were relentless. The scandal had a teacher, the sordid affair. Judgment hung heavy in the air, isolating Sarah further. She went from the vibrant woman I'd fallen in love with to a pale shadow, skittish and haunted. Part of me flinched. Had I gone too far? But that part was swiftly silenced. Mercy was a luxury she hadn't afforded me. The grocery store encounter months later was inevitable. I saw her first, thin, harried, a far cry from the polished woman who'd once shopped with such confidence. Our eyes met, and for a frozen moment, I saw raw pain mirrored in hers. Then, pride, or perhaps shame, hardened her features. We passed each other wordlessly, strangers bound by a toxic history neither of us could truly escape. My life moved on, at least superficially. Cautious dates, awkward first conversations where the shadow of Sarah lurked unspoken. Rebuilding trust felt like walking on broken glass. I was hyper-aware of every potential lie, every flicker of insincerity. The town hummed with gossip. Was I a merciless monster or the wrong victor? Some pitied Sarah, a woman led astray. Others whispered of karma, the cheater finally getting her due. I hated that the narrative was out of my hands, that Sarah's humiliation was now a twisted form of entertainment, but I'd set the wheels in motion. I couldn't stop them now, even if I wanted to. The hum of my beat-up old Honda had become a soothing rhythm, a comforting counterpoint to the storm that had wrecked my life. The police cruiser sat and used more often these days. Solo patrols, the constant chatter of the radio, they were reminders of everything that had unraveled. Instead, I drove these familiar streets with a new kind of focus, the anonymity of my personal car offering a sliver of respite from curious stares and hushed gossip. Life, in some twisted way, moved forward. My career surged, not out of some healthy ambition, but from a gnawing need to fill the void Sarah had left. Investigations that once felt routine took on a sharper edge, an almost obsessive attention to detail born from my newfound distrust of appearances. I built an icy reputation, fair, but utterly unforgiving. But peace? That was elusive. It gnawed at me that even shattered, even shamed, Sarah might find some twisted version of it eventually. Her pain no longer fueled me, just left a lingering hollowness. It was an anonymous blog post that thrust the whole rotten tale back into the spotlight. Names changed, details fictionalized just enough, yet the story was unmistakable. The cheating wife, the cop's revenge. It went viral with shocking speed, that twisted sort of guilty pleasure the internet seemed to thrive on. The comments were a battlefield. Strangers dissected my actions, arguing over whether I was a vigilante hero or a soulless monster. Messages flooded in, some from betrayed spouses, their pain raw and reaching out for twisted inspiration. Others darkly congratulatory, some even vicious, condemning me for stooping to Sarah and Mark's level. The cop husband who got revenge. The label clung to me, a bizarre kind of fame thrust upon someone who valued privacy above all else. Yet, a twisted part of me reveled in it. I destroyed Sarah's reputation through calculated action, not spite-fueled social media rants. In the battle for public opinion, it seemed I'd inadvertently gained the upper hand. News outlets picked up the scent. Requests for interviews, disguised promises of telling my side, with sympathetic camera angles. I ignored them all. This wasn't about vindication. It was about picking up the scraps of my shattered life. But as the world watched our twisted morality play unfold, the lines between justice and vengeance grew blurry. The question echoed on restless nights, had I simply become a different flavor of villain? Sarah and Mark's actions were born from selfishness, mine from a cold, methodical need to inflict pain. The result, their ruin, was the same. My cop instincts, once my greatest strength, now felt like a cruel liability. Then came the knock on the door. A woman, nervously clutching a worn purse, eyes wide with a desperate sort of hope. There was a familiar story, cheating husband, suspicions, a plea for help that grated on every cynical nerve I possessed. Part of me wanted to shut the door, to claim exhaustion, to retreat into the carefully rebuilt numbness of my existence. But the detective in me, the part that believed there was good and evil still worth separating, wouldn't be silenced. That part of me was the only scrap of the old me left, and even twisted. It was what might pull me back from her story, in its agonizing details, was both achingly familiar and yet not. There were tears, but also a quiet strength that Sarah had lacked. The husband's lies were clumsier, the desperation different. Still, the echo of my own betrayal roared like a wildfire, threatening to burn away my hard-won resolve. I need to know, she pleaded, and I saw myself in that desperate need to cling to any scrap of truth, even if that truth confirmed the worst. The case became an obsession, just like Sarah once had. Only, this obsession was fueled differently. There was no fury now, no desire for vengeance, but a gnawing need to ensure another person didn't walk blindly into the abyss I'd clawed my way out of. Evenings blurred into late nights spent trawling through bank records, piecing together a timeline from social media posts. The thrill of the hunt was back, but untainted by the poison that had fueled my pursuit of Sarah. This was about helping, about taking the skills I'd honed for destruction and repurposing them. Scandals, like flash floods, eventually fade. The media circus moved on, finding other tales of ruin to feast upon. The cop husband morphed into a half-forgotten internet legend, a cautionary tale for cheating spouses and those tempted by revenge alike. The harder thing was finding peace within myself. Forgiveness, the kind whispered about in well-meaning platitudes, wouldn't come. Perhaps the time for it would, but that wound still festered, a constant reminder of the man I'd become. Instead, I clung to acceptance. Our marriage wasn't some tragedy that wasn't meant to be. It died because of deliberate choices, hers, and ultimately, my own retaliatory ones. There was a bleak sort of freedom in owning that. My heart, in turn, learned to be cautious. In the women I dated, I was hyper-aware of those first cracks in a fabricated facade, overly suspicious of kindness that might morph into something else months down the line. Trust was a fragile thing now, requiring far more proof than a few sweet smiles and shared dinners. The legacy of Sarah wasn't just in the wariness, but in a newfound appreciation for brutal honesty. I'd craved the truth, even painful truth, and now offered it readily. Sugarcoating, hiding flaws for the sake of short-term harmony, that path had led only to ruin. Scars, both visible and invisible, were a constant companion. Some days they were just faint lines, others they throbbed like a phantom limb, reminding me of who I once was. Years later, it was of all things. A scent that caught me off guard. A whiff of Sarah's old perfume on a breeze. A floral ghost from a life buried long ago. The surge of anger was startling in its intensity, but beneath it, a melancholy I couldn't deny. Sadness for what had been lost, for what we both had become. Yet, it didn't consume me. It was one emotion among many, a sign of healing, however incomplete. In the quiet moments, the most honest ones, I'd look in the mirror and see a stranger. This grizzled, harder version of myself wasn't the man I'd intended to become, but he was a survivor. Would I wish this crucible on anyone? Absolutely not. But the fire had forged something in me, something I wasn't yet sure I liked, but respected. The road ahead was still uncertain. Loneliness was a lurking shadow, a fear that trust was forever tainted for me. Yet, there was a flicker of hope, not in romantic fairy tales, but in the gritty purpose I found in work, in entangling lies to protect others from a pain I knew all too intimately. And perhaps that, in its own twisted way, was the "Where has my ring gone?" It was a precious ring I inherited from my mother, which I always looked at when I was feeling down. It was a special ring with a big shining diamond. I thought I had hidden it deep in my cosmetic box, but for some reason it was missing from its usual place. I panicked and searched around thinking it couldn't be so, but it was nowhere to be found. In my rush, I headed towards the living room to search elsewhere. And just as I was about to open the living room door, I overheard an unbelievable conversation. I thought that ring with the big diamond would sell for a lot, but it didn't go as high as I expected. Yeah, but it sold for $2 million. So isn't that all right? Can't be helped. Now that we have $2 million, should we go on a trip? Going abroad would be nice. Sounds great. I was so shocked that I found myself letting go of the doorknob and returning to my room. Tom should know how much I cherished the ring and how carefully I had kept it all these years. I can't believe he sold it. Beyond sadness, an uncontrollable anger welled up inside me. I'll never forget this. Tom is my beloved son who I've raised with so much love, but I've decided to disown him. My name is Emily Johnson. I'm a 51-year-old career woman traveling and working all around the country. Recently, I got a promotion, so the frequency of my business trips has decreased, but I'm still living a busy life. My husband passed away due to an illness 7 years ago. He had always had a weak constitution, and after our marriage, he became a full-time house husband, supporting our home. There were various opinions from people around us about this choice, but regardless of what anyone said, I was proud of him. After graduating from university, he chose not to work and got married at the young age of 22, becoming a house husband. There were critical voices about this. Even so, I felt blessed, supported by my husband, and only friends who respected and understood our choices remained. Moreover, I was very fortunate with my workplace. Even though I was a new employee, the company allowed me to take maternity leave. Thanks to this, I was able to adjust my working hours for a work-life balance, and I could return home at the end of the stand-up working hours. We only have one child between us. Considering the fiscal toll, the first childbirth must have taken on my frail husband, who didn't have the capacity to think of having another. The three of us lived happily together, and neither my husband nor I wanted or sought anything more. However, when our eldest son, Tom, turned 20, cancer was found in my husband. The two of us went for a full medical checkup once a year, and that's when it was pointed out. Even though nothing seemed wrong during the last examination, by the time it was pointed out, the disease had already ravaged my husband's body. I've never regretted anything more than not suggesting we have those medical checkups every 6 months. His condition had already advanced, and at the young age of 43, my husband was given only 1 year to live. Hoping to spend as much time as possible with him, we decided to start chemotherapy immediately. There were side effects, and his inability to move properly and do household chores seemed to stress him, but he acted strong in front of us. 6 months after the diagnosis, at my husband's request, we switched from life-prolonging treatment to a more palliative one, preparing for end-of-life care. Desiring to make his remaining time as peaceful as possible, I racked my brains for anything I could do to help. The biggest decision I made was about our home. We originally lived in a 2 LDK apartment in the city center. We had already finished paying off the mortgage. It was a home full of memories for our family, but the view had been ruined by a new large apartment building nearby. So, I decided to buy a new house in countryside. Our original home was left to our eldest son, Tom, who would live there and cover the utility with his part-time job earnings. I also discussed with my company and got my job responsibility changed, eliminating business trips, shifting to remote work, and maximizing my time with my husband. If a trip was absolutely necessary, I'd have a subordinate go in my place, and I'd participate in the meetings online from home. Thanks to these adjustments, I could spend 6 months happily with my husband and was able to be with him until the end. Tom visited once a week, and in the end, we both were there to say our final goodbyes. In the end, we only lived in the new house for about 6 months, but I continued living in the apartment with Tom while still paying the mortgage. 7 years have passed since my husband's death, and my Tom has grown into an adult and started working. Just him becoming a working adult was joyous, but he also met a wonderful woman, and they decided to get married. I was excited to meet her and couldn't help but smile. My eldest son's bride, Catherine, was a stunningly beautiful woman. I was amazed, to be honest. It's hard to say Tom is conventionally handsome, so I was curious how he won her heart. Apparently, Catherine pursued him vigorously. It turns out Catherine's parents had already passed away, and she didn't have much relatives she was close to. I suggested a formal meeting, but due to her strained relationships with her few relatives and her most solitary upbringing, she strongly refused. Feeling it would be too cruel to push her, we decided against the formal introduction. I want to support Catherine from now on. Seeing the determination in Tom's eyes when he said those words reminded me of when I first met my husband. Witnessing Tom's growth brought tears to my eyes, even though he had only come to announce his engagement. Not long after, Tom and Catherine got married. They seemed to be struggling to find a house that Catherine liked. Upon hearing this, I suggested they temporarily stay in my apartment. Given my frequent business trips and a home office setup, I felt living in the house where I spent time with my late husband might be a good change. Moreover, I wasn't keen on intruding into their newlywed life. That'd be a great help, thank you. Tom expressed his gratitude, but Catherine never directly thanked me. Still, I knew Tom was thankful on behalf of both of them, so I didn't mind much. A few months later, Tom paid me a surprise visit with an unexpected proposal. Mom, Catherine wants to stay here permanently. She seems to like the environment. What do you think about us living together? Live together with you and Catherine here? I was taken aback by the sudden suggestion. I was used to living alone and felt comfortable that way. The idea of sharing a space, even with my son and daughter-in-law, felt intrusive. Moreover, no matter how wrong it felt to think so, Catherine was still a stranger to me. The idea of cohabiting brought nothing but apprehensions. If living together in the same space makes you uncomfortable, what about renovating and making it a two-family home? Well, in that case, Tom persisted, and eventually, I agreed to the idea of renovating the house into a two-family home. Tom could only offer $6,000 as a down payment due to his savings situation. As a result, I had to take in a loan for the renovation costs. Should anything happen to me, Tom would take over, so I agreed to bear the other expenses. However, Tom's promised payment never came. I reminded him several times, and while he initially appeared apologetic, he eventually became distant, so I stopped pressing him. In the end, I lost touch with Tom. On the rare occasions we did talk, the atmosphere wasn't right to bring up the money, and the house was completed without him ever paying the promised amount. Nice to living with you from today, Emily. Likewise, Catherine. I'm looking forward to it. As soon as Catherine arrived at the house, she briefly greeted me and went straight to their side of the house. The lack of any talk about money or words of gratitude left me feeling uneasy. Originally, a single-story house, a second floor was added for my eldest son and his wife. Catherine had strongly desired that the living room be shared. The floor plan seemed a bit unusual, but considering that they would eventually live here as one household, it didn't seem too strange. After looking around the house, I called out to Tom, who was nearby. Tom, when I'm away on business trips, could you please help with cleaning the house? You're welcome to anything in the fridge. Huh? Me? Oh, right. Why do you even ask for such things? So bothersome. I was surprised by Tom's words. I had never thought of him as someone who would say such things, but it crossed my mind that perhaps Catherine was influencing him. However, I quickly dismissed the thought as rude and shook my head. Perhaps it was my oversight and I had unknowingly raised him this way. I had left so much up to my husband. There must have been aspects of Tom I wasn't familiar with. That's what I decided to believe. Regardless of what he said, if Tom would clean, that's good enough for now. I reassured myself with that thought. However, soon after we began living as two households, I regretted my decision to cohabit. The first sign was evident when I returned from a business trip. After being away for almost half a month, I found layers of dust on tables and shelves. It was clear that if even a simple cleaning had been done once a week, it wouldn't have gotten this bad. This meant that, during my absence, Tom hadn't cleaned even once. Hey Tom, you remember I asked you to clean while I was away, right? As I spoke to Tom at the entrance, he didn't respond, just looked at me and entered his house. Did he just ignore me? I was surprised and honestly shocked by Tom's unexpected behavior, even though we made eye contact. I felt uneasy seeing Tom like that, so I immediately knocked on the door to the house where he lives with his wife. However, even though Tom should be home, he didn't answer. Suddenly, Catherine appeared from behind. Oh, Catherine, sorry, I believe Tom's inside. Acting as if she hadn't heard me, Catherine brushed past me, unlocked the door, and went inside. Catherine's treatment of me, as if I were invisible, left me even more puzzled. Were they both in a bad mood about something? Their new life had just begun, and perhaps things weren't going well. Thinking I might be overreacting, I headed to my own front door. But soon, I realized my feeling of being troubled was justified. Huh. The door won't open. Believing there might be a misunderstanding, I tried to open the door to the living room, but it was locked from the inside. I could hear the two of them chatting happily behind the door. I tried turning the doorknob several times. Even though the sound of the doorknob turning echoed in the living room repeatedly, Tom and Catherine's conversation never stopped. I had to admit that both of them were intentionally ignoring me. Why? What had I done wrong? Despite pondering, I couldn't find an answer. Waves of loneliness and sadness washed over me, and I soaked my pillow with tears as I slept throughout the night. Dawn broke, and the situation remained unchanged for some reason. Tom and Catherine continued to ignore me. The uncertainty of not knowing the reason was unbearable. However, as time went by, my feelings gradually changed. I got used to this new lifestyle, and deep down, started feeling like nothing more than an unwanted guest. Thinking of my husband and recalling the times when I lovingly raised Tom would bring forth emotions, but continued to neglect to face those feelings. Before I knew it, all I could think of was how to sever ties with Tom and Catherine. I had prepared the necessary paperwork. All that remained was to go through with it. Even with everything ready, my emotional attachment and memories of a younger Tom held me back. But one day, an event occurred that finally pushed me over the edge. As usual, I returned home from a business trip, only to encounter an unthinkable incident. Where has my ring gone? It was a precious ring I'd inherited from my mother, one I'd always gaze upon whenever I felt down. A special ring with a shining large diamond. I was sure I had hidden it deep within my makeup box, but for some reason, it wasn't in its usual place. In disbelief, I frantically searched around, but it was nowhere to be found. In a panic, I headed to the living room to check elsewhere. But the moment I was about to open the living room door, I overheard a conversation that I couldn't believe. I thought that ring, such a large diamond, would fetch a high price, but it didn't sell for as much as I expected. Yeah, but we did sell it for $2 million, so I guess that's decent. I can't complain. We got $2 million, so why not go on a trip? Maybe abroad? Sounds great. Overwhelmed with shock, I found myself letting go of the doorknob and retreating back to my room. Tom should know how much sentimental value I placed on that ring and how dearly I had treasured it. To think he sold it, beyond the sadness, an uncontrollable anger bubbled up within me. I never forgive him. Tom was my beloved son, raised with all the love I could give. Yet, I reserved to cut ties with him. I immediately sold the condominium I owned in the city. With the maintenance fee getting higher, it was a timely decision. Using that money, I purchased a new condominium for investment purposes. Following that, I also sold a plot of land where our two-family home stood. Though it was in the countryside, I originally built the house there because of my job, ensuring it was in a location with good transport links. Its value remained high, and I was able to sell it for almost the purchase price. I had been paying off the mortgage for that house ahead of schedule, so half of the selling price stayed in my hands. With the money I received from the sale and my minimal belongings, I decided to embark on a new chapter in my life. When leaving the house, I called out in the living room, "Thank you for everything." But the continued cold shoulder from Tom and his wife persisted. Their reaction was so expected that it felt almost comical, making me burst into a smile. Half a month passed since then. Since I often went on business trips, Tom didn't contact me, thinking it was just one of my usual absences. Fortunately, during that time, thoughts of Tom didn't bother me, and I was able to hire a lawyer and proceed smoothly with various preparations for the future. A month later, I finally received a call from Tom. "Hey Mom, what's going on?" I received a notice saying they are going to demolish this house by the end of the month. Tom's voice was clearly frantic due to the sudden demolition. However, it was apparent that, despite making him pay for utilities and property taxes, he assumed he could continue living in the house even after I left, which made me leave involuntarily. "Why are you laughing?" "Of course I'm laughing. I was the one who paid for everything for that house, right? Whatever I decided to do with it is my business, isn't it? It wasn't just you living there. Why would you go ahead and do this without consulting me?" "What are you talking about? Acting all entitled without paying a cent? That house is mine. Do I really need to consult you?" Still heated, Tom hurriedly confronted me, but I calmly answered and brushed him off. Tom stumbled on his words and went silent. But his thoughtlessness just made me feel pity for him, and I could only sigh. "You didn't charge me for anything in the past 2 years, and now suddenly." "Of course I tried to bill you multiple times, but who kept ignoring them? If we can't even have a conversation, how can I bill you?" "But that's—" He seemed to want to counter, but no more words came from Tom. Silence settled on the phone line once more. Sensing his hesitation, I asked Tom if he was open to discussing matters. "Well, I guess maybe. You were so indecisive. I need to discuss this with Catherine too." Tom's evasiveness only made me pity him more, and I sighed even deeper than before. Hearing this, Tom, seemingly irritated, began to speak with a forceful tone. "I didn't want things to turn out this way, but Catherine kept saying you never really did any cleaning or cooking and was always slacking off. She said she felt there was no need to get along, and I thought there might be some truth in that slacking off." "Tom, you do realize I was working, right?" "Of course, I know that, but Catherine works too, and we share household chores. You and Catherine are both working, right? Your father was a stay-at-home dad who loved housework. We discussed and decided to do what each of us was good at. Don't you understand that?" Was that the case? Surprisingly, Tom seemed completely unaware of this. I knew he was laid back and a bit oblivious at times, but I never imagined he was this clueless. It seems Catherine had been feeding him various reasons about how incompetent I was as a mother, even going as far as to suggest that as a toxic parent, I should be punished. What shocked me most was that Tom had swallowed all of this without question. Wait, did I misunderstand something? I'm speechless. Just think about it calmly on your own. I'm busy, so goodbye. With mixed feelings, I hung up. Later, I contacted the lawyer I had hired and had them inform Tom and Catherine of the date and time for our meeting. On the day of the discussion, I arrived early at the agreed-upon location with my lawyer. Tom and Catherine showed up a little late. Catherine looked clearly displeased as she met my gaze. "Look, I'm busy with both work and housework. You called me here. Can we wrap this up quickly?" "Catherine, stop it. Stop interrupting me." Reprimanded sharply by Catherine, Tom shrunk back like a scolded child. It became evident that, although he had grown physically, mentally he was still immature, making me deeply disappointed in my own son. "That's right. Let's discuss what we need to and conclude as quickly as possible." Maybe irritated by my taunt, Catherine's face grew even more displeased. In this tense atmosphere, I decided to speak calmly and clearly. "You probably know this already, but that house is set to be demolished in a week. You've already decided on where you're moving to, right? Why should I have to find a new place? Both that house and the apartment, they are mine. Catherine shouted at me with fierce intensity, but I remained unmoved. It seemed Catherine hadn't fully grasped her position. I placed the documents and a copy of the property registry, which I had received from the real estate agent, in front of her. Catherine looked shocked as she glanced at the papers. Why? The house was supposed to be in Tom's name, right? I don't know what leads you to believe that, but the house has never been in Tom's name. Both are in my name. But it was supposed to be your husband's house. Shouldn't Tom inherit it? Where did you get the idea that the house was in my husband's name? My husband, thinking ahead, had everything registered in my name. Catherine's face went pale, and she fell silent. Catherine, who had been so assertive, seemed to have mistakenly believed that everything was registered under Tom's name. Of course, neither Tom nor I ever thought that. It is true that if I were to pass away, the properties would eventually be transferred to Tom's name, but that's a different matter. Also, about my ring which you sold off, I expect it to be returned in full. What? What are you talking about? Without any hesitation, I handed a document to Catherine, whose face turned even paler. Upon seeing the document, Catherine recoiled slightly, as if wanting to escape. Unexpected reaction. After all, the document was a sales contract between Catherine and the pawn shop where she sold my ring. How do you have this? When I reported to the police that my ring was stolen, they looked into it for me. What? The police? Catherine was clearly taken aback at the mention of the police, her face growing even more tense. Seeing her reaction, I replied with a smile. Yes, it was stolen after all. It's only natural to consult with the police. They should assist once I file a formal complaint. However, if I can just get the ring back, that's enough for me. What will you do? I understand. I'll find the ring and return it. Just please not the police. Both Tom and Catherine work at the same company. For them, as employees, getting involved in a police case would be problematic. Their company thrives on trust from other businesses, so if word got out about the theft, termination would be almost certain. Realizing this, Catherine seemed quite panicked. So, can you return it to me within a month? It's a treasure to me. Yes. Catherine promptly called the pawn shop to inquire about the ring. I thought it might be difficult since so much time had passed, but fortunately, the pawn shop remembered the buyer of the ring. Thanks to this, they were able to establish contact with the buyer. Knowing this, Catherine seemed completely relieved. But I didn't let up. I'm glad you found the ring. Now, about the compensation for my emotional distress. What? Compensation? What are you talking about? Shocked by this sudden revelation, Catherine's voice, filled with disbelief, echoed throughout the store. Had there been people around, she would have surely been the center of attention. Seeing the utterly flustered Catherine, I calmly proceeded to explain the breakdown of the compensation. I can't believe you're demanding compensation from your only son. I never thought this day would come either. It's surprising that one can't differentiate between right and wrong. Stung by the sharp words, Catherine hung her head. Even if she seemed regretful now, my determination wouldn't change. Having to buy back the ring, plus paying the compensation, even Catherine was at a loss for words. I then handed over a decisive piece of evidence to the married couple, Tom and Catherine. Catherine's face turned ashen upon seeing it, while Tom's eyes widened in disbelief. What? What is this? It's not what it looks like, Tom. This is. Catherine seemed even more shocked than before, struggling to find words. A natural reaction. The document clearly showed Catherine reveling at a house club. Catherine, what's the meaning of this? It's not what you think. This isn't. Catherine quickly denied it. But the photo clearly showed her entering a hotel with a man, leaving no room for excuses. Then, I placed a photograph on the table that captured Tom's infidelity. Speaking of which, who is this woman? Who's that man with you? Let's talk about that first. The couple, now completely different from just a moment ago, seemed to be in a frenzy, as if they didn't even notice my presence. Watching their pitiful display, I left a simple note saying goodbye and departed with my lawyer. It seems that Tom and his wife packed up and left on the morning the demolition of their house began. However, since they obviously had no money, they had to live in a much shabbier apartment than before. Although they are a working couple, they should have been earning enough for their living expenses. However, Catherine had gotten so into going to house clubs that she had gone into debt, so there was no way they had any savings. They seemed to be living a life where most of their salary is used for debt repayment and compensation. They considered divorce, but neither had the money or energy, so they seemed to be still living together without separation. Despite the circumstances, they work at the same place and have to see each other daily, leading to nightly arguments at home. There's no love between them. And it seems Catherine approached Tom, thinking he owned 2 houses. She wanted to live with me so that after getting married, she could leave the household chores to me and live freely. Catherine carelessly told her friend about this, which spread within the company, and her reputation has been steadily declining ever since. As for Tom, he's called a few times since, but I've been ignoring him. I had my lawyer tell him not to call unless it's through him. The compensation payments have been continuing without any issues. Thanks to selling 2 houses, I have money and am enjoying my single life. I disposed of everything except for mementos of my husband and keepsakes for my mother, and I decided to live in hotel rooms for long stays during work trips or vacations. It was my first time doing this, and while I was initially anxious, I realized that the hotel life suits me, and I plan to keep it this way as long as I work. Work remains busy, and I'm living my life traveling around the country. I was hesitant about losing the house filled with memories of my husband, but the memories remain intact in photos and my mind. As long as I have those, it feels like my husband is with me. Today, the sky is clear without a cloud in sight. As I gazed at the precious ring, a keepsake for my mother, I spent the day calmly. It's been a while since the last time, so it might not fit. Don't worry, we'll make it work. Just relax. I said this to my ex-wife, whom I thought I had parted with, as she looked worriedly at me. Think it'll fit. It just barely did. Sharing this conversation with my ex-wife, I cherished this happy moment and couldn't help but smile. My name is Matt. I work in IT. Feeling the strain of sitting at a computer every day, I've recently started walking a block to get some exercise. Today, I left work early, and the sky is bathed in the colors of the setting sun. Walking down a quiet main street, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a shop window. I made a right smile in my slightly wrinkled suit and checked my ear. There was an empty earrings hole. Maybe it's starting to close up. I really should wear something in it. I smirked. It's not prohibited at work, and I thought, maybe I should wear something subtle. Realizing I had finally come to terms with the thought, I laughed at myself. The reason I got earrings. It was because of my wife. Note my ex-wife, Karen, who couldn't wear her wedding ring all the time. She wanted to wear earrings instead. When she said she couldn't wear it, it might be misleading. According to Karen, wearing it on my finger, I might lose it, and it gets dirty, doesn't it? I want to take care of the ring you got me, Matt, she said. So, we decided to wear less tarnishing earrings in place of our wedding rings. Neither Karen or I had ever gotten earrings before, and we both shouted in pain when we did. Together, we continued to wear subtle yellow stone earrings, saying ouch and it hurts. To say it myself might sound boastful, but Karen is stunningly beautiful, kind-hearted, and responsible. We attended the same college, and she even led a club. We dated from our college years, and she's always been there, pulling me along, and that's how I fell for her. After getting jogs, we get married and lived happily for 3 years. To clarify, it's not that we grew to dislike each other, and then divorced. The reason for our divorce was, in a way, a difference in values or perspective. To put it simply, intimacy faded. In our 3rd year of marriage, we both settled down at work, and I wanted kids soon. Karen said she loved children, and I believed ours would be adorable. But just as I had that thought, Karen began to distance herself from me. I thought it might be an emotional or physical problem on my end, so I initially dismissed it. But when it became clear that she was avoiding intimacy, I decided to talk to Karen. Karen, you've been avoiding me lately. Can you tell me why? Huh. You know, communication shouldn't be one-sided. If I've done something to upset you, I'd like to fix it. At that time, I thought there might be an issue with me. The two of us get along well, and Karen is always sweet to me. So I thought, maybe it's a matter of technique. But then, I received an unexpected response from Karen. It's not that you have a problem, really. Yes, I'm sorry, I should have talked to you. You see, I don't want kids. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning. Maybe it's old-fashioned, but I thought having kids after getting married was the norm. But, you like kids, right? You used to volunteer and play with them. I love kids, but I don't want one of my own. I'm sorry. I knew you wanted kids, and I couldn't say it. I thought maybe after we get married, I'd want them, but I just can't. This is my fault too, but we didn't have a proper discussion about the child. I just assumed Karen wanted them too. I know I messed up now, but I didn't think so at the time. I love Karen, of course, but is there a point in a marriage without children? I started to think that it wouldn't be different from just being lovers. We talked about it many times after, but we never saw eye to eye. If we stayed together, I feared we'd grow resentful and end up hating each other. So, wanting to avoid that toxic environment, we divorced. I'm grateful it happened before we started despising each other, but I was lonely. And because of that, I took off the earring I wore with Karen, along with the ring. The earring hole from before our marriage hasn't fully closed yet, perhaps because I wore it for so long. It's been a year since our divorce. Maybe it's time to move on. With that thought, I headed to a jewelry store to buy a new piece. Why not a general store? It felt awkward to enter one alone as a man. In a jewelry store, it's easy to pretend I'm buying a gift for a girlfriend, and I thought if I'm going to wear something, it might as well be good quality. Inside the jewelry store, there were sparkling gems everywhere. In one corner, there was an earring section. I wanted something simple like before, with a stone. While browsing, a sales clerk approached me. Can I help you find something? Oh yes. I'm looking for a simple earring. Wait. To my surprise, the sales associate was Karen. She seemed just as shocked. Apparently, she had switched jobs and now works here. It's been a while. A year. Have you been? Oh, you too. Did you change your makeup? I adjusted it for work. And you? It seems like you didn't iron your suit. It's all wrinkled. After a long separation and having not spoken since our divorce, Karen and I were able to talk just like before. I had bought a new earring, this time with an orange stone, and glanced at the store's clock. It was exactly 5 p.m. It seemed Karen was just getting off work. How about dinner? There's a new Italian place nearby. Oh, I've been curious about that place. Let's go. Karen and I entered the restaurant together. Having been a year since we last met, we spent our time reminiscing about the good old days, talking about work, sharing stories of our blunders. Even though we sat down for dinner, we got so caught up in our conversation that before we knew it, it was pitch dark outside. I really should head home, but to be honest, I feel like there's so much more to talk about. It seemed Karen felt the same as she invited. Why don't you come over to my place? It's close by. I didn't have a reason to refuse, and it didn't seem like Karen had a new boyfriend. With both of us having the day off tomorrow, I ended up staying at Karen's. Things might have progressed quickly, but considering we spent 3 years of married life together, it just felt natural. We talked until the next day. So, one of my juniors mistook gravy for coffee. It was hilarious. I burst out laughing. Haha, why do you even have gravy at work? It felt good. It was as if we were back in our college days, and it put my heart at ease. This past year, the loneliness I had felt was gone. I realized I still love Karen. And now, I see how selfish my thinking was back then. Karen? Yo, what's up? I know it's late, but I want to apologize to you. If I miss this chance, I might never be able to convey my feelings. I looked straight into Karen's eyes. Karen seemed to have an idea of what I was about to say as she gazed back at me. I was foolish. I was so obsessed with the idea of having kids that I never considered your feelings. You're the one who would carry and give birth to our child. It'd be a huge responsibility for you, and yet, I never had a proper discussion with you about it. I'm truly sorry. I bowed my head to Karen. Being able to talk to her again made me realize the significance of her presence in my life. At this point, even if we didn't have kids, as long as I can be with Karen again, that's all I want. I also wanted to talk about that, and Matt, I owe you an apology too. I was scared to tell you the real reason I didn't want children. Karen began to speak softly. You know I have a younger sister, right? Yeah, there's quite an age gap between you two, right? 6 years. When I was 6, I heard her. The story from when Karen was 6 years old continued. Karen deeply adored her newborn baby sister. One day, when their mom stepped out briefly, the baby began to cry. Back then, I thought she was missing mom and felt lonely, so even though I was told not to, I wanted to comfort her and picked her up. However, a 6-year-old girl can't suddenly carry a 2 or 3-month-old baby. Trying to console her crying sister, Karen tried to imitate how adults hold babies, but during that attempt, she accidentally injured her sister. I lost balance because I was being careful with her wobbly head. She hit her arm against the wall. Thankfully, it wasn't a serious injury, but one wrong move and she might have broken a bone or gotten more hurt. I shouldn't have tried to carry a baby with such a delicate neck, especially at my young age. Seeing her cry continuously because of the pain scared me. I realized how fragile babies truly are. After that incident, Karen developed a trauma towards holding infants. I love kids, but I can't help but fear that I might hurt them again. It was terrifying. As Karen lowered her head and whispered these words, she looked up at me. But something changed in me. In the past year since her divorce, it turns out that Karen's sister, April, had given birth. It was around 6 months ago, and Karen met her nephew. April asked me to hold him. I resisted with all my might. But April said, "You're still haunted by the past, aren't you? I know you love kids. It's okay. As long as you love the child, you won't hurt him because you're a kind soul. Taking advice from a nurse on how to hold the baby, Karen held her nephew and was captivated by his angelic smile. He was so adorable and delicate. Holding him, I felt how precious a baby truly is. And it reminded me of you, Matt. I didn't want to have a baby with you. After the divorce, I regretted it. I just listened quietly, deeply respecting Karen for overcoming her long-held trauma. Karen somehow managed to overcome the trauma she had been carrying for so long. What might seem trivial to others was a significant step for her. Knowing she thought of me as she took that step warmed my heart. I know it's presumptuous, but I want to be with you again. I feel the same way. Our eyes met. The time span of a year showed us how much we genuinely cared for each other. I still love Karen, and she still loves me. I want us to be together again. That's what I felt. Haha, I guess. If we're getting back together, I didn't need to buy these earrings. I took out the earrings with orange stone I bought today for my back. If I'm with Karen, I can wear what I used to every day. Shrugging about its newfound redundancy, she said, "Actually, I bought the same one." What? Karen laughed as she took out the exact earrings. If we're getting remarried, our commemorative earrings should be our second set, right? I couldn't help but laugh. It had been a while since we wore earrings. Come to think of it, Karen was the one who put on my previous earrings. Hey, put it on for me, please. Karen showed her ear, pleading. I found it endearing and moved closer to her, saying, all right, but it's been so long, it might not fit. It's okay. Everything will be fine. Just relax, I said as I touched Karen's earlobe and put an earring through it. You think it'll go through? It was a close call. Really? Glad it wasn't closed up. Now, Karen puts an earring through my ear. The new earrings feel foreign, but they are more than perfect to commemorate our new beginning. Years later, in my arms, there was a tiny life. Thank you. Really, thank you, Karen. Oh, stop. You are crying too much. After remarrying, we had decided, after discussions, to have a child. Of course, we didn't push it. We just hoped for it. So for the first few years of our marriage, it was just the two of us. Then, this year, Karen's pregnancy was discovered. After a difficult labor, Karen let me hold our daughter. We'll have to take the earrings out for a while. It's risky if she pulls on them. True, the holes might close up this time. Karen, laughing joyfully, gazed at me and our daughter. Seeing her so happy, and our daughter's innocent smile, surrounded by the two of them, I feel truly blessed. If they close up, let's get earrings. Matching ones with our daughter. Haha, sounds good, but what if she throws them away during her rebellious phase? I turn pale. I can't bear the thought of being rejected by such a cute daughter, but it's a rite of passage for all fathers. However, this I can promise. No matter what, I will protect both of you. I vowed this to my smiling